Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today I'm going to be giving you a garden update. First, let's start off by talking about the green stalk and my strawberries. So we finally had a nice enough day and I got the soil. I was able to get all of my green stalk pots filled, got the things stacked up, and then went around and gathered strawberries from pots that were just a little too full of strawberry plants, so I could thin them out. I still could do a lot of thinning on some of those, as well as some viable looking runners I was able to find. And so some of the plants you'll see, it's not gonna look real pretty yet because I'm only just getting it started. My strawberry plants have not actually started growing yet. They're still in the dormant phase, so they're not going to look real beautiful right now, but at least you can see what I've done. And I was able to get strawberries in all of those pockets, and I could probably fill up another full container of strawberry plants. But if I do decide to purchase another green stalk, which I'm seriously thinking about doing, I'll probably reserve that for growing other things. I don't know yet. I would like to give this time to see how well the strawberries do, because I did have several people say that they had heard from other channels that their strawberries didn't do great in the green stalk. Yet I've seen photos of strawberry plants in the green stalk doing really good. Now, I know that here, just in my little tiny world right here, that my strawberries always seem to do best when I grow them in pots rather than directly into the ground where they can spread and do whatever they want. Well, for whatever reason. I think part of the reason why is that when they're in the ground, usually they're lower down, they're more susceptible to pests as well as chickens. And when they're in pots, that keeps them up and I have an easier time controlling them. So at this point, I believe my strawberries should do pretty good in the green stalk container. Now, those of you who are interested in the green stalk vertical garden, check out the link that I'll be putting in the description box down below. If you go through that link and you do decide to purchase, you will get $10 off your order. Plus, we make a small percentage of any sale done through that link, so that also helps us out. Now, the benefit of that container, that vertical garden, is especially going to be good for those who have very small spaces. And I believe there was one of my followers that said she's using hers inside and it's working well for her. And I could imagine you could grow lettuces and herbs and all kinds of things inside. So even if you're in an apartment, if you have a corner, you can set that. It's the one I have actually ended up, by the time I got it all set up, ended up being, it's about as tall as I am. So it's about 5 feet tall. I didn't measure it, but I'm looking at it thinking it's somewhere around 5 feet tall because I'm sure it's as tall as I am. When I water that top, I have to do this because it's pretty tall. They do make the smaller one, the leaf one, that would be good for herbs and lettuces, anything that has shorter roots. And if you're short like me, that might, or you're more limited on even vertical space, that might be a better choice, just depending on where you're going to put it. I don't know the width of it, but this thing is only, it's probably about this big around, and so I think you could put it in just about any corner if you can find one inside or on, if you have a little deck, a little veranda of any kind. I think that would probably work really well. Now, enough about the green stalk. Let's talk a little bit more about other strawberry containers I'm using. So again, my strawberries do best in pots, so I have pots of all various sizes. And in this image or video clip, whichever I put up, you can see that is the pie tree, the former pie tree that Patrick had built for Ryan and Kayla's wedding. He actually has a video on that. I forgot to say in a previous video where I mentioned this. He has a video on how he made that. When the wedding was over, Kayla had no use for that pie tree, so she just gave it back to us, and then I turned it into a strawberry plant tree. And so this might be an option where you can, it's still sort of that vertical garden idea where you can build or have somebody build for you something similar to that, and you can make it as tall as you want. You just want to make sure it's very strong, and then you can set your various different pots on those levels. And again, that worked pretty good for me. The only drawback was last year some of my strawberries had outgrew the smaller pots that they had been in then. Now, in the images I'm showing you now, these are the current ones. I've moved bigger pots or transplanted them into some bigger pots, and none of them really match, and I don't care because once everything's filled in, No, but you don't notice. You're looking at the plants. You're not looking at the colors of the pots and the shapes of them. It's a matter of thinking outside the box and being creative with what you have and the space that you have, and utilizing different things, such as the idea of using gutters. That's something I would possibly consider doing along our fence line if we end up not going back to stacking our firewood there. Now, another thing that you can see that's happening in these clips and photos I'm showing is that juniper that's just on the other side of where I have the green stalk, I had to prune it way back. Now, last year I totally spaced it and didn't get it done, and it's best to get it done at this time of the year here, because you want to cut it back before it really starts getting its new growth. One, because especially where that is, I've got so many things that are going to be growing around it. I don't want to be out there setting up my ladders and trying to cut that thing back and down. I still need to work on the top of it. I'm not done yet before everything starts growing. Otherwise I'm stomping on everything, and that's not a good idea. So, and also because I like to do it while it's at the coolest time of the year, so that I can wear long sleeves, because junipers will kind of rip you up. I'm trying to get more light coming in on that deck area and then down below the juniper, so that also I can move that green stalk as close to that juniper as I can, especially if I do decide to get another one of those planters and put it somewhere on the deck. I'm thinking about it. I'm just not sure exactly where I'll do it, but right now I'm liking it pretty much where it's at. But then also having some more strawberries and other planters down below, I need to have that pruned back enough and thinned out enough that some sunlight can get in while still giving us some measure of privacy, which is one of the reasons why I keep the juniper there, because I love the privacy. Plus, juniper has its own benefits. I've made cleaning vinegars out of it. In fact, I plan on taking some of the cuttings I took off there and getting some more cleaning vinegar started either today or tomorrow. That's the plan anyway. Okay, and then my tomatoes, they germinated a lot faster this year than I remember them. Now, tomatoes always germinate far quicker than your peppers do, at least as far as your hot peppers. But my little tiny bell peppers I started all at the same time. I'm not seeing anything there. I do see one of the lemon habaneros that has sprouted. But other than that, my tomatoes, and they're still coming along. I still have tomatoes seeds that are germinating. As you can see, I got a couple of pots that are very thick. That is the black vernissage and the purple tomatoes, and I did put a lot of seeds in there. I should have probably ripped a couple of those little paper towel pieces with the seeds on them a little bit smaller, but I think a lot of times I'll just let them grow in a group like that, and you can see that in a video that I did last year that I'll link to down below. But because there are so many, and I know there's still more plants going to come up in there, I'm going to give it another week. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take what's in there, divide those plants in half, and put some in a new container, but still let them grow in bunches. Now, if you're planning on selling your starts, yes, it is best to separate them out into their own little separate pots as they get older. I don't do that. And again, check out that video and you can see exactly what it is I do as my plants mature. I try to prevent having to transplant them too many times. However, tomatoes seem to do pretty good. They don't seem to mind having their roots disturbed, unlike certain other plants like corn and beans and peas. Don't really like having their roots disturbed. You can transplant them. You just have to be very careful when you go to handle them. Where tomatoes, you can be a little rough on them, as you'll see in that video, and they'll do just fine. Now, I still have several more spaces in that container where you see the tomatoes and peppers are. There's other seeds that I'm waiting a little bit longer. Certain herbs do better even when starting inside if you wait just a little bit longer. And this is something, at least here, I found by experience, that especially a lot of your perennial herbs, just wait a little bit longer, another couple weeks after you start your tomatoes and peppers, and they'll just do a little bit better. Otherwise, they might not germinate at all. But one of the things, I might start some more echinacea plants this year off of my own seed, and I'll do that in those pots. Now, as it stands right now, pretty much all the garden related stuff I'm doing has to do with anything that's on or around my decks. That includes getting started on pruning back my grapevines. And yes, I wait until about this time of the year I start working on the grapevines. I kind of have a better idea of which ones to cut out when I get started on them in late winter, early spring. and just sort of watch them and keep pruning them back. The other thing with my grapevines is that because of the way I'm growing them is very non-traditional, like, you know, if you have a vineyard, I do things a little bit differently. I don't cut all the branches clear back to the main stalk because they also provide us a privacy wall in the summertime. So if we're wanting to sit out on our deck, have a little barbecue here and just sit out there and enjoy ourselves, we have complete privacy. Now, as I said, Patrick did finish the top of the fence on this side because he had to add to the top to make it taller, so that now we got a lot of, we have even more privacy on this one side. It's still not as tall as I'd like, but you don't want it too tall. You don't get any light coming in. And our back hedge that we once used to have is pretty much gone, and which was very tragic for me, and I've cried over that. So until that grows back, now we have far less privacy out back than we once had. But once those grapevines fill in, it's very, very private, at least on our deck, and I love that. So the grapevines for us serve two different purposes. One, well, three, because it just makes the deck so beautiful in the summertime when they're really growing. Plus they provide us grapes and they give us some privacy. So at any rate, what I'm doing is I'm pruning those back, and you know, I'm trying to take out a lot of the smaller stuff. Anything that's coming on the deck side of the garden is going to come out. I'm going to try to keep things cut way back from this side, because unfortunately with growing the grapes that way, my blueberries have started to suffer because they get far less light later in the year when those grapevines really take over, and they will come out several feet into the deck and totally overshadow the blueberries. Now, we don't need as much deck space as we used to, so I might be pulling my blueberry pots closer in as those grapevines fill in, but I'm going to do my best to just keep pruning them back and then let them do whatever they want on the outside parts of that railing that goes around our deck and supports the grapevines. So I didn't finish saying other seeds I plan on starting later this week will be those little red Italian onions I was talking about before, as well as maybe the echinacea, because I'm thinking about having some more plants, and the astragalus. That's the other one. That's the newest herb to my garden that I plan on starting this year, and we'll see how it does. Hopefully it will do well. And then the first seed, I haven't decided yet. I'm gonna have to look back at my garden notes so to see what time of the year I planted my snow peas last year, because that worked really good. Here, if you plant them too early, even though snow peas they can handle in a lot of places if you plant them as early as February. I found here you don't want to do that because, you know, we have heavy rains from fall through early spring, and if you plant them too early, they just drown. They get too much water. The climate, the coolness is fine. It's the rain that just prevents them from growing. So I did find a perfect time, and I wrote it down, I'm pretty sure, in my garden notebook. This is why it's a good idea to keep a garden notebook. So it might be later this month, either mid to late March, I'll be starting those snow peas. They're usually the first thing when it comes to anything I direct seed that I start. And then beans and corn usually get started early May. So they need a couple more months before you start those. And then potatoes are the next thing after the snow peas that I'm going to plant and get going. And those are March 31st is usually the date I choose to do that here. And a couple other updates is my rhubarb has been growing. You can see in a couple of these pictures, and the chickens have been all around there, so they're kind of digging out some of the roots. I'm not worried about that because I was thinking about digging that up and dividing them up and giving a couple of plants to my neighbors. I talked to them yesterday, and they are really wanting to grow some rhubarb, so I might be able to give them a couple of starts and kind of thin down that rhubarb a little bit, so because those plants get pretty big. Since the chickens already got them half dug up and they're growing good, I'm going to probably be getting on that sometime soon. Oh yes, and somebody mentioned walking onions. I keep meaning, I think I have some that someone sent me, and I keep forgetting them, so I'm going to dig around back there in my seed and see if I still have them, and if I do, I'm going to get those in the ground too. So hopefully I do, because I keep hearing good things about walking onions, but I keep forgetting to get them planted. And then as far as the rest of the garden areas, we're still mulling certain things over. We got various different ideas. We are looking at doing the Lexan idea, at least standing it up as walls to make a protective barrier that will help prevent it from the colder winds and stuff, because as each summer seems to be getting colder, we've been struggling with certain plants. And so we're going to probably be doing that, but I've pretty much decided that the larger garden section in the backyard is going to be predominantly perennial herbs. I will still grow some annual vegetables like my beans there, because we do have that bean trellis, but I grow my beans all over the place. That's just the main area for my beans. I still plan on doing that. And I'm gonna still try doing the corn there, using the Lexan wall idea to help give them some protection so that they should grow a little bit better. And then probably my tomatillos, like I always do on that east far side. But as far as the whole rest of the garden, I'm looking at making it all perennial herbs and a few annual herbs like nasturtiums and calendula. And then using my front yard garden for most of my other vegetables like the zucchini, potatoes, carrots, because we've got the carrot boxes. Patrick's probably going to build me a couple more carrot boxes, just having a whole row along that front area of the garden that's right up next to that fencing we have in there. And then what I'm hoping we'll have time to do, that Patrick will have time to do, I've got so many projects for him, it's sad, the poor guy. But my one thing I'd really like to do is, we had a fire pit out back. Well, it's still there, but it never gets used anymore, because now that we have the other property, if we're ever going to do anything where we want to sit at around a fire, we'll go out there and we'll build a fire out there instead of the property and just get away from here. That's, you know, so we'll do our big family barbecues like that out there, and then we'll build a fire and sit around it and just have a good old time. So what I've told Patrick is I want to get rid of that fire pit out there, have him build me another garden section that's just like the one I've been growing my snow peas and my squash in, and then have that be my main squash and or raspberry growing area. And then the other one, the one that's close right up next to chicken coop, have that be reserved for snow peas and maybe more potatoes, because potatoes don't mind having some shade. That area just doesn't get as much sun. I think my squash would do better if I could have it out a little bit more, because the chicken coop and the playhouse do shade that area quite a bit. So that's a plan, and also that would help provide a little more privacy in the summertime between us and the neighbors behind us, now that we don't have those tall hedges there anymore. And as I said, they're still there, they're just very short. Thankfully, laurel grows quickly. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and be watching for more of these down the road. And don't forget to check out the links I'll be putting in the description box down below. All right, well, thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.